Natalia Sylvester's young adult novel, Breathe and Count Back from 10, will have everyone reimagining a life where all we did was swim our hearts away in the cool spring Florida waters. This beautiful story opens us up to the world of Verónica, a Peruvian-American teen who loves the water so much that she longs to become a mermaid at an aquatic theme park. But she has two things standing in her way: her overprotective father and her diagnosis of hip dysplasia. Natalia reveals her journey as a writer who wanted to see characters reflected between pages that mirrored her life as a person with a disability and a desire to live beyond the expectations of others. She also talks about young people finding power in speaking up and advocating for themselves in a world that feels they would never know what would be best for them. Stay with us for another episode of the Vulgar Geniuses podcast. Are you currently looking for a bookstore that has a great selection of books? Well, Kizzy's Books and More is that bookstore. Visit www.kizzy'sbooksandmore.com to purchase your next book for our book club. Use coupon code VulgarGenius to receive 10% off the subtotal of your first order. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Vulgar Geniuses podcast. We are your hosts.
My name is Danny.
And I am Verónica. And today we are joined by a just thrilling author. We're very excited to speak to them. We are joined by Natalia Sylvester. Natalia is the author of Running, her YA debut, as well as two novels for adults. Born in Lima, Peru, she grew up in Miami, Central Florida, and South Texas, and received a BFA from the University of Miami. She currently lives in Austin, Texas. You can look for her at nataliasylvester.com and follow her on Twitter at Natalia SYLV. Her most recent YA novel, Breathe and Count Back from 10, is out now from Clarion Books, and it is also our January YA pick. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to be here.
Oh, we're excited to have you here. This has been in the making for quite some time. Denny read your book a while ago, and she was like, we have to get her on the show. So I'm so glad to have you here to make her dreams come true.
It finally clicked because we were looking for authors that were first, of course, we do BIPOC authors. And we want to highlight, men, women that have wonderful, wonderful stories. But also, we wanted to connect it to Florida because we are in Orlando. So it's very rare that we find authors that have a connection to Florida. And also, I am a nurse. So I was like, when I read your book, I'm like, I gotta talk to her.
I love that. No, that's great. It's funny you mentioned Florida because I'm actually living in Florida now. I think maybe my bio might be needing that's on me. I need to update it.
Welcome back.
Yeah,
welcome back to the fire.
Are you back in Miami or are you somewhere else?
I'm back in Miami. But we were in Austin for quite a bit, maybe almost 11 years. And then we moved back in the middle of last year.
Oh, okay. Well, it's good to have you here. Maybe that's why we knew it was time.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Miami. I used to live in Miami. That's my point of entry as an immigrant. I used to live in Broward County in Hollywood, and my crazy brain would drive to Miami Beach for work and back. I don't know why.
Oh my goodness, that is wild.
Yeah. But
you were young and dumb, so
yes, it's okay. We do things.
All right. So before we get to the nitty-gritty of your book and all of who you are, we like to, just have a little fun in the beginning and loosen up the joint. So we're going to ask some fun questions to start with.
Okay. So what about, mermaids and the Cove likened to that magical place in Florida that attracted you to it the most?
Oh my gosh. I don't even like, I feel like, how do you even describe this? I know so many people who've told me this. It's like all they wanted to do is be mermaids when they were young. I think that it's like one of our first fantasies. At least for me, it definitely was. And so I think, when I was little, my cousins and we would play. My cousins had a pool. We would spend all like we'd spend hours and hours in the pool, and we would play mermaids. And the first thing we would do before we even began to play was describe exactly how like our characters looked, their names, the colors of their fins, the colors of their hair, the style of their makeup, what kind of top they were wearing, what mermaid name they had. Like and it's, in a way, I look back and I'm like, that was my first experience with storytelling, with creating a character, with really just making an entire narrative out of and finding ways to play with it, and really finding joy in it, finding escape in it, but then also looking back and realizing like you're expressing something through those choices. Like my tail was always purple. And like for me, it was just because I think even at that young age, I was like, I don't know. Everyone's going like I really loved purple because when in school, everyone wanted to either pick pink or blue. And I just thought like how boring to exist in these two extremes, and to these two like, assigned like colors that you're supposed to love depending on your gender. And I just thought that was it felt very arbitrary to me, and I feel also like because I came from already like being a young immigrant in Florida, and finding even at that 6 years old, realizing that you're existing between worlds, and not knowing exactly where you fit in. And I didn't want to feel ashamed of that. So for me, even at that young age, like embracing purple felt like a rebellion, because like celebrating this in betweenness. And even as I began writing Breathe and Count Back from 10, I think I kept coming back to that even with mermaids, because when we talk about mermaids, we say they're half human and half fish, but really they're like this whole beautiful creature in and of themselves. And I think that to embrace their wholeness and to embrace the fact that maybe we don't have to be half anything, we can just be like all these different parts that make us complete.
Purple is my favorite color. Just so you know. Just FYI.
She would have been right there with you.
Yes. So Veronica was looking at your Instagram account, and then on the Peruvian Independence Day, you decided to go in the cup, and she was asking why.
Is there significance?
Oh, you mean, wait, when I dove into the cup?
Yeah.
Oh, I think at the time there was like a viral TikTok going around there was like a woman who had like done that with a wine glass, talking about how she, when she's about to go to her book club and you just see her like slowly sinking into a glass of wine. And I just thought it'd be funny to do that with a glass of Inca Cola, which is like, in Peru, it's like, it's a Peruvian soda, and we just are so very so very like enthusiastic and like ferociously love this soda, almost to a point that it's cliche. So I just thought it'd be funny to have this video of like, yeah, here's all Peruvians on the 28th of July, just diving into a glass of Inca Cola.
It worked because she was like, what is happening?
I thought it was very cute, especially you giving like the follow-up behind the scenes.
With my dog.
Trying to get into shots.
She was not impressed.
She was like, If Breathe and Count Back from 10 was made into a movie, what character would you play for cameo?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. Ooh. Oh my gosh. I never thought of that. I had to think of something. God, what would I be able to do? I mean, it has to, I hope it could be like a mermaid, one of the background mermaids, maybe, because I just want to be a mermaid still. I was supposed to go to mermaid camp for research for this book, and then it got canceled because of the pandemic. So I'm still bitter about it. So if I can get in a tail somehow, even if all they'll feature me as the fin, I don't care, as long as I'm in the water.
That would be cool, you waving in the background.
In a purple fin. There we go.
Yes,
There you go.
yay. Also, we went deep down. In November 19, 2012, you posted a picture that had this question. What would you attempt if you knew you could not fail? So in 2023, Natalia, we ask you the same question.
Oh my gosh. I don't even remember posting that, but that's a very good question. You really went deep. What would I attempt if I couldn't fail? I guess, I mean, it is something I'm trying to do, but I would like to take ballet classes. I was terrified of taking ballet classes growing up because of my hip dysplasia. And I did take some, you know, because I was involved in dance when I was younger, but mostly like jazz or modern dance, like all these other kinds of dance. And every time we did ballet in school or like outside of school, if I took workshops, it was a very scary experience for me. And I think over the years, I've just like shied away from it. But recently I was like, well, what if I go back and, you know, maybe adult ballet classes will be kinder.
Yes.
Yes.
So I think, and also what's the, you know, how would we even define failure then? Right. Because is there such a thing as failing dance when it's really just about being okay in your body and expressing something through your body? Versus I think when I took dance when I was younger, it very much did feel more defined by like, it felt like a failure if I couldn't move the way other kids moved, or if I couldn't extend my leg in the same way, or, you know, there were just all these other modes of, or measures of success that were really about me comparing myself and my body to others that now, thankfully, I've completely shed and decided to reject. So I guess maybe it would be a really interesting thing to attempt again without that barometer.
Yeah.
I was afraid of dancing too when I was growing up because I just felt like people that dance exuded a lot of confidence. So I just found a husband that can dance. But you know what I wanted to do? If remember I told you if we answer this question, I think now that I've convinced myself, I really want to free dive. Like you free dive and like and just be one
In the water.
and not fail. So it means like, you know, you just stay there.
And you can have your purple fin.
I mean, if she can have the fin, I can just, you know, I can just be in there.
All right. So when we first heard of you, it was through Sanel Barnes' anthology, Measure of Belonging. In your personal essay, you write about your journey dealing with dysplasia. From reading that essay, we can see that you pulled a lot of your experiences and implanted it into this book. Will you share with us your story, origin, and desire to share it with young people?
Yeah, that's such, oh my God, I'm so glad that you know, we connected through Sanel. I adore her and her writing. And, you know, I don't know that Breathe and Count Back from 10 would even exist had she not invited me to write that essay for the anthology. And so I guess my background, so like Verónica in my book, I was born in Peru and I was born with hip dysplasia. And I had several surgeries as an infant. And then later, once we moved to the US when I was 4, throughout my childhood, I was in and out of surgeries. And at times I was in a cast or I'd be in crutches. There were times when I would not be able to go to school for months at a time while I recovered from surgery. And and a lot of that experience I brought to this book, you know, to Breathe and Count Back from 10. The big difference being that, you know, in Breathe and Count Back from 10, Verónica auditions to become a mermaid performer at her local mermaid theme park. I never got to do that, but I lived vicariously through her in writing this novel. But, you know, the thing is that when Sanel approached me about writing an essay for the anthology, I remember not knowing exactly what I could bring to it. I really had not written much about disability. I'd never really I hadn't written much about my own disability and my experiences with hip dysplasia since I was maybe a child. But I think I remember writing essays about it when I was like in my early teens. But then once, my first book came out in 2014, and I had 3 books. Well, at the time I started writing Breathe, I had 2 books published and 1 book already forthcoming. And I think I hadn't felt ready to write about my disability yet. And I think that for a lot of reasons, I think that our society is very invested in us not self-identifying as disabled, as if it's as if it's something that we should be ashamed of. And the fewer, the more we remove ourselves from that label, the more it enables people to then not have to care for us or accommodate us at a societal level. And so there's a lot of us who, even as disabled people, have to go on this journey of just questioning and dismantling a lot of internalized ableism over the years. And so I think I was also working through that. And so when Sanel approached me about writing this essay, and it was so much about place, it was so much about what it's like to grow up in the South. And for me, I thought I was thinking about my experiences growing up in Central Florida, specifically, and in Miami. Not only as an immigrant, but just all the surgeries that I went through and all the doctors that I saw through the years, not only in Florida, but also when I lived in Texas, and realizing how much those experiences were not at all separate, that I couldn't really view my own lived experience if I'm not looking at it fully through the lens of both as myself, as a Latina, as an immigrant, and as a disabled Latina immigrant. And to really fully embrace that, that essay was my first time putting it on paper. And I look back sometimes, and there's lines here and there that I'm kind of like, oh, I was still working through that. There's a line in the essay about strength, about something, and then now I look back and I'm like, no, strength is not this thing that we have to aspire to, so it's you still are on this journey sometimes. And by the time I was writing Breathe, I was actually really, really much more interested in what, when we are pressured into being strong, into being so-called brave, is it really about suppressing our own pain for the benefit of others? Because I remember for a long time feeling very proud when my doctors used to call me strong, right? And looking back, I realized, but I was keeping quiet about my own pain for their own comfort, and just so that I could get a pat on the back and feel proud, and for whose benefit?
Yeah. It makes me think about a conversation we had with a writer about the resiliency that gets placed on people of color. And especially when you're a child having to go through as many surgeries, it never gives you a moment when someone is saying, oh, you're so strong and brave to go through this. Never allowing you to just be I want to feel the way I'm feeling in this moment and be allowed, and not have to put on this front as if, it's something else. That might be somewhere in the background, but this is where I am right now. And then, people want to put this up. And I think mostly due to the fact that they don't want to have to deal with the conversation of why does this make you feel uneasy? Is that correct in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Sure.
Mermaids, is the center of this story in a way, and they can be found in many cultures. From Wakachina in Peru to Mama Wata in Nigeria. You go deeper into the fairy tale of Ariel and the variations of her story. What do you think it is about this myth that so many find so fascinating?
Oh my God, that's a really good question. I don't know. I think that as people, we can look at certain things and inevitably come to similar conclusions, right? So, just for me, I've always been fascinated by the ocean, right? And by the sea and all the secrets it might hold. It feels like a whole other planet, really, the depths at which we don't even know how many species exist within the ocean. And so, I imagine that probably so many different cultures had that similar fascination. And came to overlapping but very distinct mythologies and legends. And I don't think it's right that we should only have one representation of that, right? And it's not to say that we only have one representation of it, but we do tend to have one that is amplified more than most. And so, and even Verónica, like in Breathing Count Back from 10, she's really obsessed with the Little Mermaid. And she goes from really holding it up on this pedestal and really to the point that she's memorized entire lines, and she thinks of it constantly. And it's really not until later in the book when she and her mom are, talking about the Peruvian myth and ways that she wants to kind of retell it and make it her own, that she's maybe re-examining ways that the Little Mermaid myth actually, again, glorifies pain, glorifies the fact, because there's a line in the Little Mermaid that's like, again, about enduring pain, that it's about like once the Little Mermaid has legs, that every single time she walks, it's like she's walking on like knives, right? And Vero goes from seeing that again as like brave to realizing like, wait a second, like I feel pain and I feel like I have to endure it, and that's not right. And so I just think that there's a lot of, I think that in mermaid myths, there's a lot that people can see themselves in different ways, because ultimately I feel like it's about fluidity, and I think it's about nonconformity, and I think it's about what we don't see enough of, like the parts of us that we don't see represented enough, that we wish could be not only represented but celebrated as beautiful and free. And so that's what it is for Verónica.
Yeah, I think also there's something about just the water, being able to just like swim around in the water. Because I grew up swimming. That's what I like to do. So I was like, what it'd be like if you can just go deeper and deeper, a little bit more,
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's like a little challenge that you do with yourself. But for me, what attracted to me a little bit also in the book was like you started each chapter with this with a word, and you help define it, and then it's a like a dictionary depiction of the word, and then like Vero's her own feeling about the word, or how she thinks about the word should be, or what the meaning of the word is hers. Why was that an intentional part of like every chapter of the book?
Yeah, I love how many people have asked me about that, and how many people have told me it resonates, because it almost didn't make it in.
What?
There were parts in the process I had to really fight for it. There were parts in the process like where people were like, "Oh, you maybe should take this out," and I was like, "No, they're staying. They're never going anywhere." But really, so there is a lot of overlap, but not sameness, right? In Vero's experience and mine, because basically there's a lot of things that with Vero are like rooted in something that happened to me, but then I try to make something bigger out of it and make it be a jumping off point into like somewhere somehow that I could give more meaning to it and maybe get more imaginative with it. And really that's where the craft of fiction comes in. And this is a really good example of that, because in the book, the reason Vero writes these dictionary definitions is because she has a teacher who used to homeschool her while she was recovering from surgery, who assigned her to read, David Copperfield, excuse me. And in that book, there's a character who writes their own dictionary. And it makes her realize like, oh my God, I didn't know that words could be like definitions. I never thought about the way that words are defined by people. And so she kind of decides to reclaim that power and define words on her own terms. It was inspired by the fact that when I was recovering from surgery, when I was, I think 9, my teacher actually had me read David Copperfield. And I also was like, oh my God, I did not know that you could do this. But I never wrote my own dictionary. I just thought like, oh, that's interesting. And then just went about my life. So again, I just wanted to, but it's this question and this fascination that stayed with me. And I thought like, if I were to give this characteristic to Vero, what would she do with it?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of times where I did that, and she just took things so much further than I could ever, because I think she's someone who's a lot more inquisitive and a lot more rebellious in spirit and a lot braver than I was at her age.
I always like when writers start talking about their characters, because I really feel like when you all are sitting down to write, these characters out there are telling you, this is what we want to be. And I can feel it in the way that you are just talking about how she wanted, to work through everything with the use of those words. And it resonates. I just want to tell you that.
I think it made it a very effective, character, because the character basically became bigger, and she grew in many ways, in very many ways. So
yeah.
It is already hard to overcome prejudice from other people. But in your story, you allowed Verónica to have conflict with her parents regarding the limitations that they think she possesses. How important was that to be highlighted in your book?
It was hugely important. I don't know that I even conceive of the story existing without that. I find it interesting when I read books for children, for young adults, kidlit, because I also write. I write for kids as well. My next book is the picture book, but when there's not like a strong adult presence of some sort, because for me, I didn't grow up as this really independent person who got to just go around. Maybe if I'd lived in a city with more public transport or something, but my life was very much dictated by the adults around me. Mm-hmm. So of course there's a very deep relationship with that. And they're shaping the way you see yourself and the way you see the world, the way that you are able to interact with the world. And often, I couldn't imagine this being a coming of age story without her then re-examining and trying to change those dynamics in order for her to be fully, to have more agency in her life and in her own body. And so, Vero is, her parents have so many good intentions, but they really protect her too much. And I think that's something that so many of us can relate to as children of immigrants. Or if we come from a family of immigrants, or actually, and to be honest, actually, not even immigrants. I think that, anyone who is of color in this country, we have this, I think that our parents grow up knowing that the rules that might apply to children who are white and born here are not the same rules that, their kids will have to, will have to quote unquote, play by in order to survive in the world. And so, while I can see that the desire to be protective and to want to, keep your child from being hurt, there are times when it can go too far, and then it can hurt them too in more intimate ways. And by that I mean just by a close family member telling you what you can and can't do. That's, how is that any better than in Vero's case, an immigration system that dictates her life, or a medical system that traumatizes her body and mind. Mm-hmm. So I just didn't see her journey really being complete without that relationship being pretty front and center.
Yeah. Can we also talk about, this is, me, I think this question came from me being part of this medical madness that we all know, how Vera's parents chose to conceal the truth about what they know about her disease. And, is it really okay to do that? If so, when is the right time to allow children to be part of the conversation? Because I work in surgery, so I would see parents and children, even adults, choosing certain things for themselves or for their family members. So I was just, very curious how you chose to navigate Vero's story in such a way that it's also realistic, but also there can be conversation about it.
Yeah. I mean, she's at this cusp, right? She's 17. Legally, not, legally a minor, right? But also I feel should be fully involved in the decisions made about her body. But I don't think her parents have quite made that transition yet. And not only that, but they really do have a lot more trust. And I don't know if I would call it trust, but they have more, they submit more to this idea, like the power dynamics that play between the medical community and the patient, right? I grew up very aware of like that in my community, the role of doctor was like one in which like it was spoken like as if they were on a pedestal. And I say that as a daughter of a doctor and as a sister of a doctor and like a niece. I had a lot of doctors in my family. And I remember like there was this like authority given to them, right? And I'm not trying to criticize, but I'm also trying to say that there needs to be an awareness that when you're in in that room with a patient who might not feel empowered to speak up for themselves because they see you, and there is a very it's not an equal footing, in terms of the power dynamics between the patient and doctor, especially sometimes cultural culture plays into it as well. And so, in Vero's case, like their doctor's white, and she, here are her and her parents who don't yet really speak a lot of English. And there's just so many different ways that they don't often, at least, excuse me, when she's very young, they do speak English in the book. But from the beginnings of that relationship, it didn't necessarily start with the best of power dynamics. So I think that that's something that I feel like we need to be aware of, right? And really not like approach it in this way of like, who's getting to tell this patient's story? Who's getting to make the decisions? Is the patient? And again, how we even talk about the patient, even I'm saying that right now because I'm so used to hearing it, then I repeat it, but I'll tell you the first time I read my medical records, I think I was like 20 or something, because I'd never really seen them. Like my mom handed me my medical records. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'll finally get to read the story of my hip, of my body. And it was so jarring because I was like, this isn't at all how I experienced it. They didn't know the whole story, and I expected them to, but then I thought, no, why would they? Right. I'm the one who knows my body's story. And so I think that there needs to be, and not just in the case of Vero, who's 17, but I feel like any child in a body knows, needs to have their voice heard and centered and involved in those decisions. I think kids are a lot more perceptive and aware than we give them credit for.
Yeah. I think that was really powerful because, I think that's what drew me to you, because when I read your essay in the anthology, it kind of reminded me sometimes your work becomes just is, and then you go into this routine, right, with anything. And reading stories like yours helped me to go back why I chose this profession, and then how I can be a more effective healthcare professional, and how you can, because nurses are supposed to be advocate for patients, right? So when you feel like, oh, something is not right here, or we're overstepping boundaries, we can stop, we can pause, and we can be like, so how about you? What do you want? So it kind of reinforced oh yeah, I guess I should be more vocal about those things, because sometimes, like you said, we put these doctors in pedestals, and we still do. It's still happening, but yet sometimes not everything you see on the surface is what's really going on with the patient.
Yeah. No, I think I love that. I'm so happy that resonated with you, and that you're taking that, in your work, because that's huge. And I think that could make such a difference to anyone. I'll tell you the most powerful experience I had last year. I had my hip replaced in March, and soon after I had another appointment with a different doctor, but for something else entirely. But she was like, I had another procedure done, and she was like, this is really painful, probably. Like she at one point told me, like, you don't need to be brave for me. And because she was like, it seems like you have a very high threshold of pain. Are you okay? And again, I was like, I realized and even having written this book and having worked and trying to unpack all these things, even in that moment, I was just like trying to keep my cool and trying not to be a bother. And I think she noticed it. And she said to me, she was like, don't worry about me. You don't have to be strong for me. And that was just incredible. And I value that so much.
Yeah. When I just listening to what you're saying, it makes me think of my youngest niece, who is now a grown woman. She had scoliosis, found out when she was about the age of 4, and she was in gymnastics, and her gymnastic teacher saw the curve. And she had all of these different surgeries because they thought it was maybe there was a leakage from the brain that they thought that was causing the spine to start to curve. And so she had that surgery, and then later on she has this surgery to straighten out her back, and then she had surgery for her feet. So she has all of these things. And I don't think I've ever asked her where she was, how she was feeling in any of those moments, because she was the type of person to never show that she was in pain. And I don't know if it was just because she didn't want her parents to worry about her, or if that's just naturally who she was. But it really makes me wish, number one, that I had read this book when she was younger, so that we could have those conversations of like, it's okay, tell me exactly where you are. What are these moments of checking in? How do you feel about having all of this done to you? Because I just recall, like, after she had the brain surgery, and she got a ticket to go to an amusement park, and she wanted to ride on a roller coaster, and I'm like, well, we can't go because you just had all of this. And you could see the disappointment, but then she was like, okay, but we never really talked about it. And I think that this is something that I think every parent should read, no matter where their children are and what they might be going through, of like checking in with your children about a realm of things, not just, like physical ailments, but other things that could be bothering them. Which then brings me to the love interest in this story. So you created a love interest for Verónica, who is battling a mental illness. Will you speak to why you wanted to create a character like Alex, and also talk about the differences between him and Verónica having to figure out how to live with things that they both try to hide, where, for her, it might be, using clothes and trying to shift weight, where everything is on the inside. So you can't really see what is going on unless he verbally tells you.
Right. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up Alex, because I love him as a character. I love the way he and Verónica's relationship evolves throughout the course of the book. When I first started writing, I always knew that there would be a love story in Breathe and Count Back from 10. I knew it wouldn't necessarily be like the center of it. It's not like it's not like her whole identity, or it's not like her development is like catapulted by the love story in and of itself. It's like something that supports her journey. But in the beginning, I remember the first chapter I wrote. I wrote it in a scene in Alex was actually a different character. He actually made her very uncomfortable. He would ask about her scars in a very invasive way, and she just didn't feel good around him. And I realized really quickly that that's not the story I wanted to tell, and it's not the story I wanted to center, because I just thought, like, I know these guys. I dealt with those guys my whole life, and it was really painful. And what I wished would have happened was to have met someone more understanding, who I didn't have to explain myself or my body to, especially at that age, someone more like Alex. And I just thought, if I'm going to write a whole book with, that inevitably is probably going to delve into difficult things for Verónica, if I want to be truthful to it, why would I want to make the core of it those painful and traumatic experiences? Why can't the core of it be like these more safe and more healthy experiences. And so that's really where Alex came from. I just thought, who can she meet who would make her feel seen and heard and safe, and who could she in turn like give that same safety and acknowledgement to. And so, I didn't necessarily start out knowing that he had depression, but the deeper I got into it, I just realized, like, I think that we talk a lot about when we talk about disability, we talk about like the visible and invisible, and the physical and the non, as if there's no as if there's again, two sides of a coin that could never intersect. Where I think that there's actually a lot of not even necessarily overlap, but just even the ways that they don't exist in a bubble. Like Vero has a physical disability, but she also has things that she's dealing with on an emotional level, and that in some ways could be seen, that are traumatic, that are very anxiety and just inducing, and probably in some ways she's dealt with levels of depression in her life, and Alex has depression, but depression manifests in your body physically. And so I think that it becomes they understand that about each other, but they also understand they make space for it, but they don't make it the only thing they see in each other. And I just really wanted to just let them be, because as I was writing this book, a lot of it, I had to just listen to my body, because there were times when I was like, I can't write a scene today in which it's just going to be re-traumatizing an old wound, reopening parts of myself. And I was like, I need to write a scene that feels like it may be healing parts of myself. And I just thought, if I can do that, then maybe I can do that for a reader too.
Veronica is a teenager who is having to navigate a lot in her life, and each area of her life is met with some sort of microaggression within conversations from her doctor to even her own family members. What did you want young readers to notice about these comments and moments within your novel?
So it's interesting. It was speaking of that, right? Going from speaking of I did want to send her joy, but I didn't feel I could be truthful if everything was just rainbows and mermaids. I think that when we write our characters, especially when they're coming from marginalized identities, they're gonna have we have room for all of these things, right? Yes, there's sometimes pain, and there's joy, and there's there can be shame imposed upon us, but there's a lot to be proud of. And I think that for me, I kept thinking of what are the moments in which the pain is background and the forefront is the joy, and what are the moments when inevitably the pain kind of resurfaces in ways that you don't expect. It interrupts that joy. But by the same token, there are moments where, let's say she's having a really hard time, and then the joy happily interrupts, right? So I don't remember the question now.
It was in regards to the microaggressions, like her going to the doctor and him referring to her as his favorite Peruvian patient and things like that.
Yeah, so I think that what I wanted to make clear is that, yes, these things do exist very constantly, but so does all the other amazing things about who we are and our experiences. And so there's no need to erase any of them. We can see all of them, right? I think that sometimes, especially because of the way publishing can often talk about our stories as if it's oh, we need your stories so much right now, as if it's they need them in order to solve the problem of racism and xenophobia and sexism and transphobia and all these things. And I'm no, we need our stories, us, the people writing them, and the children who will see it, and the youth who will see themselves in it. They need it because the stories matter, period. Don't talk about them they're going to solve the problem, when it's no, that's actually a far more complex thing. And the stories are definitely a big piece of that. The fact that our voices get heard are a huge piece of that. But, publishing them and people reading them doesn't fix the problem that people need to fix in themselves. Right.
Right.
So it's important that that those microaggressions they're there because they're part of our experience, sadly. But they're not the whole picture.
So, like medical procedures, hospital visits, the people, doctors and everything, professionals, they're very scary. All of this is very scary to a young child, and it develops into trauma, and it affects, children all up the way to adulthood. If this is too personal, let us know. Like, how are you able to like cope and just continue to cope with all the trauma that had happened, or how are you working through it?
Well, this is going to sound cliche, but I think writing the book was a huge part of it. But having said that, I did not do it in a vacuum. I definitely, I found an amazing therapist. I was lucky to find a really amazing therapist right around the time I started writing this book, who really specialized, like she was Latina, she specialized in immigrant families, and she really understood disability as well. And it was this really strange experience of unpacking a lot of things at the same time that I'm writing and then processing, through Vero's story. And I think I really do, this is going to sound so funny and silly, but I really do think she made me braver and like a better advocate for my body, because I went into it thinking, okay, I don't want this to be a story about her overcoming her disability as if it needs to be overcome, or about anything in her body being fixed. It's really about like, one of the first lines that I wrote was her saying, I'm okay in my body. It's my body in the world that's not. Because I do think that when we talk about oppression, it's really important that we look at what needs to be held, what and who needs to be held accountable. And I think that the systems in place that are failing us, even through this pandemic, as we've seen, are the ones that really need to be held accountable. Right. And so it's not about Vero fixing herself. It's not about her, being healed or anything. But in order to do that, there were times that I had to be really truthful about her body. And I had to even in some ways like describe how she felt in it, and to literally sit in my body and describe things that for years I had been not giving a voice to, that I had been telling people I'm fine with, and oh, I'm not in pain right now, and maybe I wouldn't have even bothered saying I'm not in pain because I would have just wanted to imply it, right? I wouldn't have even given space to that pain. She really, like, to have to see how to write her story truthfully ended up making me have to voice my own experience more and be a better advocate for myself. And to the point that like the next year when it came time to have surgery, it's like the first time I've ever sought a second opinion. It's the first time I ever was like, actually, this doctor isn't a good fit, and I'm going to go find another one who like understands that I have like a story to tell in my body, that I'm not just this last x-ray. And again, those are all things that I don't think it's a place I don't think I would have gotten to without writing about it. And as far as how I continue to do that, I think, the other thing is I wouldn't have been able to write this story without, like, had I not at one point, like, found, like, an amazingly, like, supportive and thriving community of disabled writers who are already, like, doing such amazing work and making it so that I can no longer just ignore these parts of myself, and making me realize like, oh yeah, there's actually no shame in me saying, hey, I'm disabled. And there's no shame in me saying, yeah, like I have these scars and I don't need to hide them. And so I think that's never going to stop being a journey though. Like I think about that all the time, and it's like, you realize how much of it is still left to understand. Like, I mean, even now that, I had my hip replaced, like I said, in March, and my body is changing in all these ways in response to it. And I have to like constantly be aware of like, wait, how do I feel about that? And if I feel bad about that, like, is it that I really feel bad about that, or is it that I'm being influenced again by our culture, which is like fat phobic and which is ableist and like all these things, and how it's a lot, honestly, but I would rather be aware of it than not.
Yeah.
How has the disabled writing community have held you during this process of getting this story out?
I feel like so wonderfully. I've heard from book clubs, like some of the most beautiful conversations I've had have been from disabled readers, who, either chose the book for their book club or just messaged me privately to tell me what the book meant to them and what parts resonated. And also, other authors who, like, we try to amplify each other as much as we can and read each other's work. And so it's a really big, it's a source of strength, to be honest, because it's not always easy to be your own advocate.
What about the conversations that you've had with teenagers? Because it's one thing to talk to us grown folk, but it's another because this is who you've written this book for. What has that been like to convey all of what you talked to us tonight about to these young people?
That's been the part that really makes everything worth it, because I will say, as much as I'm really proud of this book, but it was also very painful to write at times. And there were times when I wondered, like, am I re-traumatizing myself? I had to then redirect how I would write it. So I had to also learn not only how to write it, but then how to do it in a way where I'm not re-traumatizing myself and hopefully not traumatizing readers as well. But also make it meaningful enough that hopefully they'll find something in it that speaks to them. And when I do hear from, like, I've heard from teen readers, and hearing from them makes it worth it. It's, it really makes it, it's going to sound so, like, I feel like a cliche, but it really is. It's like this little part of me that feels healed every time, like, from not only how hard it was to write the book, but even just the experiences I had when I was their age. Because when I was a teenager, I didn't know anyone who had hip dysplasia, and I didn't have, like, a large community of, like, fellow disabled students. I don't think our school systems were really built in a way to, like, help us find each other, help us celebrate each other. And it just left me feeling very lonely, and like I was better off just hiding that part of myself. And so what you end up doing is you're fragmenting yourself. You're only allowing certain parts of yourself to exist out in the world and interact with others. To have, like, this part of myself now out there and hear from other teenagers that that they can identify and they can relate, and that they've had similar experiences. It's like having that teen part of myself feeling like, oh my God, I'm okay now.
Yeah, like, we've been talking to authors for a while, and it always has been our goal, to cover everybody that we feel like needs a platform to share their gift. So, we I was like, we attended this library association, like, conference, and we talked about how, we amplify voices of the marginalized here in Vulgar Geniuses. And then one of their questions is like, well, when are you guys going to have a disabled author? And I was already, like, your book was already, like, in my presence at that time. And I really said, the first thing that I will do in 2023 is to have her on our show. Cause, like, I really felt like, the power of your book. Like, I'm seriously telling you that, because it touched, it touched the little Denny, the adult Denny, the professional Denny, the mom Denny. So I was like, if more people can, like, read this book or hear you talk about this book, at least I feel like I've done my part. Like, I've done my part as a person, like, just to help amplify this voice, because it's very important, like you said, for healing. And not everybody understands, like, there's different forms of healing for everybody. Sometimes it might take a book like yours to heal your teenage self, or to be seen as a 5-year-old child. So I just wanted to say that, because I've been really ruminating about your book for quite some time now, since that conference.
And on top of that, it really shows like the importance of highlighting the disabled community, because we live in a society where we want to just push everything to the side and hide it. And as a former teacher, you think about like those children who, if there was ever time for them to come in for a test, that was when you would see them, because they would be spending most of their days at home and not having that opportunity to see them about with their other peers, to be able to have that true high school experience, because of whatever issue that they might have been dealing with. So, it really calls to the light of like, having these stories be told on a more consistent basis, of it becoming the norm of when you're going to look for a book, that you're picking up something that's going to enrich your reading and your empathy level and your sympathy level, and all of it combined.
Yeah.
So,
No, I appreciate that a lot. I think that you're right. Like there's definitely like more that needs to be done in terms of like when we talk about diversity and making sure that we include disability and making sure it's intersectional. Like, I mean, there's, I'm so happy to be able to speak with you all, and to do anytime I get to speak with someone about disability, but it's also like, I'm just one voice, and there's so many amazing writers with books that have either already been published or coming soon. Like, I mean, like Jasmine Mendez has a middle grade novel coming out in March that's amazing, like absolutely stunning. It's a novel in verse, and it's called Añana del Mar Jumps In. I had a chance to read it early, and I'm so excited for it to be out soon. And then like anything Alice Wong has written, like disability.
Disability.
Yeah, which also has a different, like there's two versions, right? There's one like the original version that published, and then they did like one for teens. And then The Year of the Tiger, I think came out last year, also by Alice Wong. And so there's just so many different places to like, and different expressions of that, like our perspective, really, so many expressions of it. So I'm glad to be able to be part of that conversation.
So probably one of our last questions is about caregiver respite. It's not always talked about, or not always the forefront in the conversation when talking about also with disability. In your book, the caregivers are the parents, Vero's parents. Can you talk to us about some, resources that are available to families and caregivers, specifically of families that have, children or adults that deal with hip dysplasia?
Yeah, so the International Hip Dysplasia Institute, IHDI, no, yeah, I'm like, did I get the acronym right? Yeah, they have a really great website full of resources online. There's also several like Instagram accounts that are, if you were to go see, now I can't think of them off the top of my head because I don't want to get the names wrong, but if you were to follow like the hip dysplasia tag on Instagram, you would find several resources. I would definitely say that IHDI is a good place to start, though. And let me see. Probably, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I think those are the main ones that I would say right now, like given my limited knowledge, because I'm probably not the best person to ask.
No, but your book is a testament enough, to all of that. So if that is the only thing that they can hold on to, that's a lot.
Well, if it starts a conversation, I'm just happy. I had one reader who reached out, and a teen reader who told me, my mom actually read this book and it made her completely see things differently, and kind of she said it helped her understand, her daughter's journey and perspective better. And I just think, well, that's amazing, because I wrote this, first and foremost for anyone who could relate to it, like, and first and foremost for disabled teens. But also if it's helping others help them, if it's helping enrich their lives, not only like through their own journey of self, but even just through people in their lives being able to be more understanding, then that's pretty amazing.
Well, we have come to the part of our conversation that we like to do with every guest that comes onto our show, and that you kind of already started. You got a head start. I don't know if you want to continue on this route, but we would like to know either your top 5 favorite books of all time, or the top 5 books that you are most excited that that are coming out that you want people to know about, or something that you might be interested in reading now that you're like, y'all need to get hip to this.
Or combination, whatever iteration you choose.
Oh, okay. Gosh. Okay, let's see. I'm going to do like a combination. But definitely, yes, already very excited about Añana del Mar Jumpson by Jasmine Mendez. Two books that kind of completely stick out in my mind as some of my favorites I've read was Carolina de Robertis Cantoras and Chinelo of Parantas Under the Idolatries. That's 3, right? And let me see. I am currently reading The Last Karankawas by Kimberly Garza, which is absolutely beautiful. And just from the first chapter, so beautifully written. And let me see. Oh my gosh, this is the part I blank out. Like, I have so many books that I've loved that like really stand out. But then of course, like, you ask someone and they completely like forget which one to name. But I'm like trying to scan my my shelves as I speak. Gosh. What else? What was the other questions though? The other prompts again?
One, either your top 5 of all time, or one that you might be excited about.
Well, right. Okay. And then I'm trying to think excited.
Is there anything that you feel like stood out for you as a child that you read? I mean, you entered into this world of writing. Is there anything that you're like, this is the book that pushed me there?
So the book that made me want to be a writer was Cristina Garcia's Dreaming in Cuban. And coincidentally, I was about to talk about her next book coming out, because she's written the sequel to it. And like Dreaming in Cuban published, I think at this point, either 25 or 30 years ago, maybe 25. But yeah, the sequel is coming out this year. And I wish I remembered the title, but definitely, I mean, it's easy enough to find if you look at Cristina Garcia's next book.
Yes. Oh my God. So I know you also have a new book coming out in 2024.
Yes.
Right?
Is there anything that you can share about that?
Yes, absolutely.
Maleta full of treasures. Is that still? Yes. Yeah.
A Maleta Full of Treasures is about a young girl whose grandmother comes to visit from her. She's an immigrant child, and so her grandmother's coming to visit from her her parents' birth country, and she brings this suitcase full of what she sees as treasures, because they're bringing all these different connections to a place that she's never been and doesn't remember, but that like really lives in her heart. And it'll be out in 2024. I'm really excited about it. Actually, I translated it this week, and so it's the first time I've translated one of my books to Spanish.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it'll be La Maleta de Tesoros in Spanish, and yeah, I'm delighted. I already saw the cover and everything. So
they will be both released at the same time?
They will be both released at the same time, and it's illustrated by Juana Medina, who is just incredible. And every time I've seen the illustrations, I just feel like, wow, I did not know that like my inner child needed this. And so I'm very excited. Hopefully, kids will enjoy it.
I'm excited for it because like it is so true. Like every time somebody that comes from like, the country of origin would be like coming, you're like, what's in there? Like, ooh, what is this? And this. It's so exciting as a child. It's so exciting.
And it has like certain smells and like candies and like there's just so much. It was all this, it felt like this big like unveiling every time.
That's definitely going to be, I feel like, a hit with the young ones, and we can't wait to see it when it comes out. Natalia, thank you so much for coming and sharing so much with us on the show to talk about your book and your wonderful life that you have led, and we can't wait to see what springs forth in the coming years. And you are more than welcome to come back if you like to talk about whatever you want. We could just sit and talk about mermaids. If you want.
Yes. Thank you for coming to the show. Thank you for, teaching me how to be more compassionate as a healthcare professional, how to be more understanding as a parent. It was wonderful talking to you. Thank you for giving us this opportunity, because it's one to read the book, but it's another to actually talk about everything that's in the book with a wonderful author. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate that so much. And I appreciate your questions and both of your thoughtfulness and wonderful energy. So thank you.
Thank you. And welcome back to Florida.
Yeah. Welcome back to 89-degree weather with 100% humidity.
I'll let you know if I make it to Orlando. I would love to hopefully do something for the book at some point there.
Oh,
yay! Please let us know. We would love to see you.
That would be awesome.
All right, you take care. Good night.
Have a great one.
You too. Good night.
Bye.
We hoped you enjoyed our show.
Our show has been produced and edited by Preston Long. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast.
Our theme song you've been nodding your head to is by Sean Kantrowitz. You can follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Sean Dammit. That's SeanDammit.
Follow us on Instagram at The Vulgar Geniuses.
Bye!